Hey everyone, my name's Matt. I'm one of the founders of Story Prism, and I just wanted to show you something that I've been working on for probably the better part of like maybe 2, 3 weeks. It took me to construct this. What you are looking at is an entire world. It's a story world that I made called Viridian that's really more like a massive cyberpunk city. There isn't really a story here. This is more of a world with a whole bunch of characters and lore and history and stuff like that you can pretty much use the open assistant to to have a conversation with it and to explore and discover this world and come up with different stories depending on what you want to do with it. It's a little messy right now. This is stuff that I'm currently working on, and these are actually really interesting prompts that we're planning on rolling out, which I'll show you in a second. Like I said, this is something that I've been probably took me maybe 2, 3 weeks to construct. It was really fascinating to kind of go from like the seed of the idea and unraveling it. And what was really interesting about using it on Story Prism was that as soon as it, gave some ideas, it just brought me down more and more rabbit holes. And it reminded me of things that I didn't really think about that I needed to explore further, like the governing structure, right? That's something that's kind of boring. It's stuff that I don't really think about, but if you're building a world, you want some sort of cohesion within the governing body that's controlling all of Viridian here. So the way I set this up is in the center, I use the pre-made prompts, the expert director, the screenwriter, and the producer. So this is essentially the main hub where everything is connected to. So that basically means that anytime this AI is scanning the notes and giving an output, it's filtering its answers through the expert producer and the screenwriter and the director so that it's always focused on those areas. And I did that on purpose, of course, because this is a fantasy world for building stories, right? We're going to actually turn this into an interactive sample at some point for you all to mess around with and, explore just to see what the possibilities are for using an app like this. Some other things that I added as well were certain tools. So like I added a character chatbot. So anytime I create a character, everything is attached to this. So these are attached to this, which means it's very easy for me to have, let's say, this character, Eve Marrow, be impersonated, and I can have a quick conversation. And it also factors in all of the notes about the character as well. So their personality, their character arc, backstory, as well as a whole range of things that they would say. So it captures its discourse. All in all, it just makes for much more precise outputs. I created a one-sheet builder because, I wanted to create at least some basic semblance of a story. I did an AI image prompt maker, which is cool. So anytime I want to get a visual on, some of the narrative stuff that I've created, like cities and whatnot, or events, I could just pull that up real quick and make that happen. And then additionally, to create the characters, I, use a bunch of prompts for that. But everything else, more or less, are just various aspects of this world. So, you have like the world, you have the history, you have the governing structure, and then you have information on certain aspects of the story. So, not to go into too much detail, but really this is a cyberpunk world owned by this company, which, I kind of rolled with it with the AI output, but it called it Omnicorp. I know it's from Mr. Robot and everything, and it's not really original, but, if I was much more serious about making this, then I would have obviously put more effort in coming up with a better name for that. But so basically Omnicorp owns the world and the governing body that pretty much runs everything. And there's this quantum energy called Aether, which kind of powers the entire world naturally. And this company led by Dr. Eve Marrow about 200 years ago discovered a way to tap into that energy and extract it. But due to a myriad of all this historical stuff that happened, the idea of Aether was long forgotten, and they wanted to keep this a secret. And the reason why is because technically anybody can tap into Aether power, and that gives individuals certain abilities like, telekinesis, astral projecting, mind reading, altering people's perceptions, things like that. And, that obviously threatens their dominance and hegemony over everything. So they want to keep it a secret, even though they're secretly extracting that to pretty much power the whole city. But in the process of doing that, there's a lot of technical stuff in there that I had it make. Essentially, it leads to a lot of environmental damage and catastrophes. And so this world, kind of similar to our world in a sad way, is slowly going extinct because they're kind of hurting themselves. And the whole thing is really kept under lock and key and secret. And so there's this whole clandestine, espionage element to this world, right? So here we go. This right here is Argent Veil. Think of this as really the CIA wing of Omnicorp. Their whole entire mission is covering up the Aether phenomenon, right? And ensuring that nobody really knows about it or its power or the things that people can do with it. And you have like this entire group of people called Weavers, which actually originally started as just like, he was a disillusioned office worker, like 50-year-old guy or whatever, who had a near-death experience. And from that, he was able to remember, I guess, as he claimed, this substance called Aether. And through a lot of research thereafter, he was able to figure out ways to tap into that. And he ended up creating a whole movement. It kind of, turned into a Jesus story. And he was assassinated, and then this whole movement grew, and then there was this massive war that pretty much got stamped out. In the current world right now is pretty much run by Omnicorp, and these guys, the Weavers, are pretty much just this very small group of people that live in this place called the Wilderness or the Wilds, and that's sort of an area that it's pretty much barren for the most part. It's uninhabitable. There's a lot of nasty, like weird creatures there that could be dangerous. And so nobody really lives there, but the Weavers do. And that's kind of where they're sort of hiding out. And then within the Weavers, you also have this like radical sort of Al-Qaeda type group called the Zodian Network. They're kind of the main opponents to Omnicorp. But yeah, so that's sort of the gist of this world. And what's really awesome, something that I discovered, was the multi-tagging feature. So this is something that a lot of you guys were talking about wanting to add in. Previously, you could really just assign one tag to one note, but with this new feature, you can pretty much tag as many notes as possible. The more you add, the more context in the connections and everything and the relevancy that you're giving to the AI so that it can give much more precise outputs based on the keywords, right? So for instance, actually, so before I do that, let me back up just to kind of explain one other thing. Some of the things that we're doing is we're coming up with all these pre-made prompts that would be really helpful for, world builders and storytellers, in particular, to add like a lot more realism to it. So I created this science consultant that pretty much acts like a expert scientist that's on a film set that advises you on like how to enhance the authenticity of whatever you have in your story that, science related. And the same thing with philosophy, politics, military, police stuff, right? Because there's a lot of, stories that have, police related things in there. And I also added something too, like it's a trope detector. So whenever it's coming up with ideas, I can ask it to filter through the trope detector so that it comes up with much more unique ideas instead of like the typical standard thing that you might expect Let's do something interesting. Basically, what I did here was I asked it to use the AI character chatbot and pretend to have a conversation with these characters, but to filter the entire conversation through the philosophy expert so that the conversation is deep. But then, I also gave it a few extra instructions to ensure that it utilizes subtext and stuff like that, right? So this is what it gave. Yeah, neon sign flickers outside the rain-streaked window. Inside a battered wooden table seats Jory Cade, Kaylin, and Alara. A glass of sweat between their hands. A low hum of conversation surrounds them. But their table is a quiet eddy, thoughts running deep beneath the surface. Jory Cade. Funny thing about truth. Always seems to show up late to its own party. You two ever notice that? Feels like we're all waiting for an answer that's too polite to interrupt. Kaylin leans back, voice gravely. Truth's a luxury. Survival doesn't wait for philosophy to offer a blessing in the wilds. It's not about what's real, but what keeps you breathing. Okay, so this is a little too much for me. It's a little too deep. So I went ahead and, told it to tone down the cleverness and, depth and to make it just sound more real and direct. So let's see what it does here. So Jory Cade. Ever notice how nobody really answers a straight question? You ask why things are the way they are, folks just change the subject. Kaylin, gruffs. People don't like being reminded there's no good answer. They're just jumpy. Sometimes I think we're all just pretending we know what we're doing. Fake it till you make it, except nobody ever makes it. What's the point of all this talk? Drink your drink. Days start early. Guess that's one way to dodge the big questions. Okay. Let's see here. Oh, yes, I totally forgot. Ensure that you are fully utilizing their discourse. See, so I added a tag called discourse to all of the characters' notes that describe their discourse. And so that should allow it to know that, oh yeah, I need to factor in these notes to make this better. So let's see what it does. Maybe it'll work. I don't know. I haven't tried it. Jory Cade sprawls comfortably, fingers drumming on his glass. Kaylin sits rigid, coat still on, eyes wary. Alara sits small, hands wrapped tight around her mug. Okay, so it definitely hits the characters, like what they would do. You ever get the feeling the universe is running some kind of long con? Keep looking for the punchline, but all I get is bills and bad coffee. The world doesn't bother with punchlines, waste of energy. You get what's coming, one way or another. I always thought things were supposed to make sense eventually. Like if you just keep going, there's an answer somewhere. That's the trick, Alara. Sense is just something folks make up to sleep at night. Truth. Okay. That's definitely much closer to the characters. And actually what's interesting is I gave them a famous actor to kind of take on the role. So one character in particular is kind of interesting. Silas Vaughan. Okay. Let's have Silas Vaughan enter the building and join in on conversation. Remember to utilize his discourse. So it is working with a lot of notes, which is why that's where the keywords come into play. And the more tags you add, the more effortless this will feel. So if you add 20 tags to all your notes, then you can pretty much ask questions in a myriad of ways. So here we go. Well, look who's wandered in from the land of lost causes. Pull up a chair, Silas, just in time for the existential question. Voice calm, clipped, every word measured. If you're debating existence, I suggest you start with evidence, not anecdotes. The world isn't shaped by what we want to believe. It's ordered by what we can prove. Some of us don't have time to run experiments before breakfast. Out here, living simpler. Simplicity is an excuse for stagnation. Progress demands sacrifice, precision, not superstition. So yeah, that's pretty interesting. Actually, Silas Thorne, well, let's see what actually it is. Who is Silas? Yeah, so that's another thing that's cool, right? I mean, there's a whole ton of information here, right? And a lot of times, we tend to forget stuff that we've written down. So this is a really great way of being able to pull a lot of that up. So based on the notes, Silas Horn is a complex visionary scientist deeply embedded in the secretive power structure of Omnicorp. He's in his mid to late 40s with a medium slight stocky build, salt and pepper hair, and thin frame glasses that add to his scholarly demeanor. His appearance is approachable, yet a bit unkempt, often dressed in comfortable and smart casual clothes that contrast with the high-tech secretive environment around him. So he's a visionary futurist. He combines an exceptional intellect with a drive to push the boundaries of technology, biology, and energy, specifically aether energy. He's known for blending different scientific disciplines. Okay. So yeah, I mean, this pretty much just can give you a comprehensive backstory on really whatever you want. One last cool thing that you can actually do with this is you can use pre-made prompts, right? Especially like things like this, like the expert philosopher, political consultant, to add realism to your story. And you could do this with other things too. Like you can use the trope detector to figure out like areas where, it's just a little too cliche and like how you might be able to make it different. And so you can have it really just scan all these notes. And so you can have a pre-made story, like something that you've already been working on, and then use as many prompts as you want to go note by note, or just scan all the notes and find problems in different areas. So, for instance, use the military consultant and identify areas in this story that can be more realistic military standpoint. So it's sort of an open-ended thing. I mean, probably should have put a little more thought into that, but just to kind of prove what it can do. So so it approaches the story from the perspective of the military consultant, focusing on areas of military realism, right? So military narrative overview based on your notes. There's a conflict between Omnicorp and the Zodian network, right? So Omnicorp uses aggressive media warfare to frame the Zodians as terrorists. The Zodians are depicted as an insurgent military group fighting against oppression and cultural erasure. So the main character undergoes transformation from a controlled conformist operative in Omnicorp attire to an adaptive leader in the wilds, right? So realism, evaluation of the key military elements, media warfare as a military tool, current betrayal. Omnicorp's media machine is used to delegitimize and dehumanize the Zodians, justifying security crackdowns, realism gaps. This portrayal is plausible as information warfare is a core part of modern and future conflict. However, actual military media operations are highly coordinated and multi-layered. Now that's interesting. I didn't know that. Continue from where you off. Yeah, so that's something that we are working on. Unfortunately, it tends to cut off, so we're trying to get it to pretty much just give the full answer. I mean, that's the least we can do in the world that we're living in with all the technology we have. But let's see here. So media warfare as a military tool. Okay, so enhanced suggestions. Show the chain of command. Depict specific roles. Media operations chief in Sentinel Corps tasked with coordinating propaganda, psychological operations, and information security. Depict counter-propaganda. Portray Zodian or Weaver counter moves, such as encrypted broadcasts or underground newsletters to reflect real-world information battles. Operational integration. Illustrate how media strategies are coordinated with on-the-go military actions, e.g. a crackdown is timed with immediate leak or staged discovery of the Zodian weapons. Yeah, so that's really cool. It just honestly just goes so much deeper. And from this, I can modify any notes I want, right? And so I can actually hone in and specifically, tell it to take Cerebos, phrases, for instance, and apply X, Y, Z while keeping everything the same. So it'll rework it pretty much as I have it already written, but it'll integrate all of the suggested changes. So this is something that can really help you make those changes on the go really fast. And as we develop this further, we're just going to create easier ways to be able to streamline those things so that you can pretty much expand endlessly. And eventually we want to get it to a point where we're going to allow you guys to share this with other people so that they can talk to the assistant and interact with this entire thing that you construct, whatever it is, so that they can have a conversation with it. So yeah, this is some really exciting stuff, guys. So I just wanted to show you real fast, like some of the stuff that I've been doing on here and stuff that you could build. This is something that can be very simple, right? In terms of what you want to use it for, but you can also build out just a ridiculous amount of complexity if you want, which clearly just gives you much more precise output. So yeah, more to come, in the coming weeks. So excited to share that with you guys. But for now, best of luck in your creative endeavors.